I'm Gina Messamer, and we're at the Parish Law Firm here in Des Moines. We're on Grand, just a little bit west of downtown, and a lot of attorneys here do criminal defense work. There are several of us that do civil rights work. Alfredo Parrish is the namesake of the firm, and so he's done both of those things for a long time, and then we do a little bit of everything else too. But I've been here and I focus on criminal defense and civil rights work, and I've been doing it about 5 or 6 years now. I've practiced law for 7 years. I graduated law school from the University of Iowa, and then I worked for a justice on the Iowa Supreme Court for a year, and then I worked for Judge Stephanie Rose in federal court for a year too. So I've had 2 years working for judges, and then I've been here the rest of my time. I specialize in criminal defense. I do both federal criminal defense and state criminal defense, and then also the civil rights cases where if somebody's constitutional rights have been violated, I'll file a lawsuit for those people. Honestly, I went to school in Texas and I ran track down there, and the people I was surrounded with were, it's a lot of African American people that were on the track team, and those were my friends because that was my team. And so I think just getting to be in close relationships with people like that exposed me to just different backgrounds. They were from all over, and kind of see the way they perceive things, the different way they're treated, hear how they, just the issues that they deal with that I never dealt with being from Iowa. So I think that kind of just got me interested in this type of work, and it's pretty rewarding. I feel like you're fighting for people who've been treated unfairly. And when you work in the law, you kind of expect the laws to apply equally to everybody. And this is an area of law where you're like, it's not fair that the cops don't have to be responsible for their actions. And so you want to, I enjoy trying to hold them accountable when they've done something that's wrong. So a pretextual stop is when an officer pulls somebody over, and the reason they pull them over is not really what they're looking into. They really, maybe they pulled you over and they say it's because you had a license plate light out. But really what they want to see is, have you been smoking marijuana? So that's a pretextual stop. And I think it's important to recognize that law enforcement does have the authority to pull somebody over if they have reasonable suspicion of a crime being committed. So if law enforcement really thinks that you're smoking marijuana, they should have a reasonable suspicion of that. They should have some basis to pull you over for that particular violation. They shouldn't just get a cop out and be able to pull somebody over for a ticky-tacky traffic violation in order to then see this is maybe a black driver, and I have a stereotype that black drivers are smoking marijuana if they're out after midnight, and so I'm gonna pull them over for the ticky-tacky violation, but really what I'm doing is checking this other thing. And they don't even, officers that pull people over for these pretextual reasons, they don't intend to write a ticket for the thing they're pulling them over for. It's just an excuse to get to this other, maybe, and oftentimes could be a stereotype that they're wanting to check out. And I just don't think it's a useful law enforcement tool because, like I said, they have the right to pull people over if they have reasonable suspicion of a crime. So if you want to pull somebody over to investigate marijuana, you should have a reason to think that they're smoking marijuana beyond just the fact that they're a black man driving in a certain neighborhood at a certain time. If your constitutional rights are violated and you're charged with a crime, so say you're pulled over for no reason, and then after you're pulled over, the officer finds that you had been smoking marijuana. Well, because that original stop was illegal, you should have never had an interaction with law enforcement at all, then all the evidence that happened after you're pulled over will be thrown out of your criminal case. The prosecutor can't use that in a trial against you. So that leaves the prosecutor without any evidence in that case, and so they have to dismiss it. So that's what a suppression is. You're suppressing that evidence so the prosecutor can't use it, and it will result in you winning your criminal case. And then you might also be able to file a civil rights lawsuit if you wanted, because your constitutional rights were violated. So it's two sides of the same coin. You've obviously got to deal with the criminal side of things first, but after you do that, you could look into your civil rights lawsuit if you might have one. It's just stopping a law enforcement officer from doing something they're entitled to do is basically the gist of the crime. But yeah, it's just a simple misdemeanor. It's punishable by, I think, a $65 fine. And that's about it. You could do a little bit of jail time if it was something egregious and the judge wanted to send you to jail, but it's a very low-level offense. I don't know about one particular case that I've dealt with. A lot of my cases are still pending, so I don't want to talk too much about them. But in particular, what kind of bothers me the most in Des Moines is the summer enforcement team, which is the group of officers in Des Moines who are focused on what they call proactive policing. And those are the officers who their charge is to look for drugs and guns and gang activity. Well, you know who they think is doing that? They think young black men. And so those are the officers that are doing their pretextual stops. They call them, the proactive stops, to just shake people down and see like, hey, this is a young black man driving on the north side and it's midnight. I'm gonna just pull him over because he didn't use his turn signal for long enough and see what I can find. And that's a practice that group of officers is using and that the police department is committed to continue using, and it really bothers me because I've seen a lot of my clients have been stopped by those officers. So that bothers me because it's a pattern that I see and nothing's being done about it, even though people are filing complaints. What I think is missing is we don't know how many stops where they don't find anything. They don't record that. So I don't know how many times they pull somebody over because of a ticky-tack violation and then just let them go. So we know maybe they found 70 guns in a summer. Well, how many people did they stop in order to find those 70 guns? I don't know. So I think I would need to know more about, I've seen enough people, my clients, where they found nothing. And those are people whose rights have been violated. So I don't know. I think we could do a better job policing. Yeah. Maybe they're finding some things, but they could do it in a lot more targeted way. That is something the summer enforcement team does. They look for black people who look nervous around the police. Well, why do you think that is? That's just a terrible cycle because you're making them nervous by the way you're treating them. And that's who then you're targeting when they look nervous. So yeah, absolutely, that's a problem. I think this is, something we've run into with another client, but when you're stopped by law enforcement for no good reason, it takes effort to try to vindicate your rights. If you want to file a lawsuit, you have to, give up a lot of information about yourself. You have to work with an attorney, go to appointments. You might have to be questioned by an attorney. So it's a hassle if you want to try to pursue your rights in a lawsuit. And a lot of people who have felt like they were targeted by the police are afraid to take further action or be public about what happened to them because they're afraid they'll be further targeted. I see a lot of cases where I think what happened was wrong, but I won't take the case because I don't think I can win, because pretextual stops are legal. So if somebody was stopped for some kind of traffic violation, that's going to be difficult to win that case. It's also very difficult to win race discrimination cases because the court wants you to say, all right, so you pulled this one black guy over for his traffic light was not on, whatever. But did you also, you have to then show on the flip side that the officer did not pull over a white person who did the same thing. And that's almost impossible to prove. So equal protection cases are very difficult because the standard is very, very high. So I kind of have to see a pattern of conduct before I think I might be able to win an equal protection claim. Third thing that can be difficult for these cases is if maybe somebody's been put in handcuffs or roughed up, if they didn't comply with being arrested, that will knock out their case because you have to not resist arrest at all in order to have a claim, which, I think the law on that is kind of wrong, but that's what we have to deal with. So a lot of times, even though something feels wrong to both me and the client, it might not be a winner case. But there are ways to win lawsuits too. If you are compliant and you're put in handcuffs for no good reason, I think that's a legitimate reason to maybe bring a civil rights lawsuit. If you're harmed when you're being arrested and you're not resisting, that's a reason to bring a civil rights lawsuit. If you have been stopped for no reason, that is a reason to bring a civil rights lawsuit. And those things do happen. So, check with the lawyer if you think that you've been treated improperly. Contact a lawyer. And even if a lawyer tells you, I don't think this is enough to file a lawsuit, get with an organization like CCI, or just do it yourself. Go to the police department and file a complaint, because these should be recorded in the officer's files so that, somebody down the line, like me, maybe I'll have a client in the future and I'll be able to get those records, and it'll help that client in the future prove his case because you filed a complaint. And hopefully, if you file a complaint, the police will also do something about it too, Who knows if they will or not, but it's worth a shot. So those are things I think are worth doing. The things that have been more frustrating to me, like in a prior case I had, where something I was asking for was, here are some policy changes I would like to see happen. And it's not even, they won't even consider it as part of the conversation in talking about how to settle that case. So that is frustrating to me. It's just about money, and they can write that off and move on, and they're not willing to actually make the change so that it won't happen again. So that's, you're always happy for a client when they get some money, but if you think it's just going to happen again, that's a little discouraging. Really, you can negotiate anything. If the city would agree to it, anything's on the table. But for them, nothing is on the table except money. So in Des Moines, at least, you're not going to get anywhere with that. And all the releases that you sign have the standard language about how they don't admit doing anything wrong.
Right.
So
Yeah.
other departments, I think when the Justice Department's involved, then they'll maybe have a more sweeping reform package that they're looking at. And the city could do that with regards to individual cases, but they haven't been willing to. My advice would be to ask the reason for the stop. Do not consent to a search, because once you consent, that makes whatever happens okay. So, and it's also, do not argue with them unnecessarily. Don't escalate the stop, because they still have the power in the situation, and they can abuse that power. If they don't like how you act, it's more likely they're going to take you to jail or escalate things further. So, be polite, but do ask the reason for the stop, and do not consent to a search. Ask them for the reasons for why they're doing things, because these officers, in Des Moines at least, are supposed to have their body cameras running at all time, and so those explanations will be captured. And if there's something wrong with the stop, then reach out to an organization like CCI, or call an attorney like me, and they can review what happened and let you know, hey, is this something that maybe you should just complain to the police about because it's not right what happened, or is this something where you might have a civil rights cause of action where you could sue and maybe get some compensation? So, try to keep things calm, because that protects your interests in the stop, but also try to get some documentation of what's happening and why it's happening. I think definitely, and I think that we undervalue those. I've got one client who's in his 20s, and he's been pulled over and has like 10 tickets for driving in Des Moines. And he's not a crazy driver. He's just someone who has a nice car, and he's a young black man, and he has dreadlocked hair, and so he's pulled over all the time. And I think, what must his experience be driving around Des Moines when you have that many interactions with law enforcement for no good reason? But it's just kind of like a loss of power of your power. You feel like you can't control what happens. And in terms of how people interact with officers during stops, like I said, I encourage people to be cool about it and stay calm. But how hard is that when it's not fair? There's nothing fair about it. I don't know. I think this whole I can't breathe thing resonates with me too, because it's like a very literal thing for, these people who've been killed, but also it just is kind of sucks the air out of you when you're treated this way on a repeated basis in your own community, and you don't feel welcome, and you don't feel like things are going to be applied equally to you as they would to somebody else. I think that's definitely right. And at the national level, with these cases that have really inflamed everyone's passions, it's really egregious, where somebody might lose their life. But I see it a lot of times with people at very, lower levels of force that I think are inappropriate, but still really traumatizing. If you're pulled over for a traffic violation and you end up in handcuffs, that's not how I think I would be treated in a stop. I would be really upset if I was pulled over for speeding and asked to get out of the car and then handcuffed. But that's something that I see with some regularity with African American clients, or ended up having your car searched. That's not something where I think that's how I would be treated. So yeah, those low-level things, that's where I think that there should be more accountability. I think it has to be an attitude shift, first of all, and I think it's a leadership issue. I think, people who are on this Blue Lives Matter, they want to talk about the police officers who are out there doing their job. And there are a lot of good police officers, and they do have a difficult job. And so it shouldn't all fall on them, because it's a culture issue at, the higher level leadership. They're the ones deciding the policies. They're the ones who have the ability to say, here's what will and will not be accepted. So I think it has to be at the highest levels of leadership, and they have to be willing to take responsibility. I was just looking last night. I was looking at all the settlements the city has had on civil rights lawsuits, and what Sergeant Prezik, the police spokesperson, has said about all of them. And never is there an acceptance of responsibility. There's never an apology. There's never a statement by the police saying what happened was wrong, and we realized that these are the causes that led up to this. It's not just this one bad officer, it's the environment and the culture that the officer is in, and here's what we're going to do as a police department to make sure this doesn't happen again. And so until there's that acceptance of responsibility, I don't think there will be change. So that's kind of a difficult dynamic too. I think as criminal defense attorneys, I've been thinking about what more could I be doing. And I do see cases where maybe there's not a civil rights violation, but I think something wrong happened. And I think I need to do a better job about publicizing those stories, sharing them about, if there was an unconstitutional stop, or if law enforcement didn't tell the truth, and so then a case got dismissed. I should be sending my own letters to the police department so that there's a record of what happened, and I should help those people share their stories too. So I think that's something as lawyers we could be more engaged with. Every time we win a suppression case, we should be collecting that information somewhere so that we can see a pattern about the officers. Because right now, you could win a case and there's no record of it anywhere for anybody else to find and kind of maybe see a pattern with what's going on with an officer or what's going on with the department. So I think maybe sharing more of that information amongst ourselves or getting a database together would be good.